Hi there, and welcome to this dev update for motion matching for Unity. This is for MXM version 2.2, and right now we are looking at the work in progress new standalone demo. I really wanted to take this demo next level, but still using cut clips. I'm using the Mobility Pro mocap set. That set has a lot of problems, however it does have good coverage, and I've managed to overcome the problems. Things like mismatching poses and stuff like that. But regardless, this is what it is. I really want to show off MXM in something that looks more like a game. I'm using the decouple controller, which has been reworked for MXM v2.2. So there's a little bit of foot sliding, but that's a bit of a design decision that I've chosen because I want to balance between, realism and responsiveness. So the decouple controller gives me a bit more responsiveness, and unfortunately there's a bit of foot sliding as a result. You can choose what you want if you want to use it or not, but yeah, there'll be a tutorial on decouple controllers at some point soon. You can see the new footstep system, or rather not the new footstep system, but the improved and properly working footstep system operating here. I've actually got the sound turned off, but you can see it's triggering sounds and VFX and footprints. I'll turn that off as well. Now the sounds and the VFX and the footprints aren't really part of MXM. MXM's just triggering it based on footsteps tags that are automatically set up, and we'll go through that in this dev update because it can take a long time to tag footsteps, but there is an automatic method available. So that is pretty much it. This is part of my new sort of development philosophy that to make MXM the best I possibly can, I need to be making a game with it. And while I might not ever ship this game or anything like that, or it might only ever become a fancy demo, that's fine. The point is that I encounter the same problems that you encounter when you're trying to make your games. It makes it much easier for me to find bugs, and this is part of the reason why MXM version 2.1 and 2.2 have been such big updates, is because I've been able to find out what works well, what doesn't work well, and where the bugs are a lot more. So a lot of bug fixes in this update and a lot of improvements, some to quality of life, some to actual internals. So there we have it, a bit of a standalone demo work in progress. I'll make this available when I'm happy with it. So let's have a look at what has changed. Okay, so before I get into all the fun stuff for this update, there is a very, very important thing to note about this update, and this might not affect everyone. It's only going to affect people that have created custom root motion applicators and custom generic controller wrappers. Now, I've had to change the way that root motion is applied from MXM through root motion applicators. Specifically, the iMXM root motion interface has a function called handle root motion. Previously, this function would take absolute position deltas for root motion. Sorry, not absolute position deltas, absolute world positions for root motion. In hindsight, that wasn't a good idea. I've changed it so that that function takes root deltas for rotation and position, and then it sends that to your root motion applicator or your iMXM root motion interface. So if you have created a root motion applicator, custom one, or implemented iMXM root motion, those values are now deltas. That's very important. I'm very sorry that I had to change this, but it really had to be done to fix some problems, specifically with root motion and kinematic character controller and all that. Now, of course, the same is going to transfer onto the controller wrappers, the generic controller wrappers, like Unity Control Wrapper. Those deltas are being passed on to that now, as well as deltas. And I think it was always deltas for position, but for rotation, it was an absolute. That is now also a rotation delta. So everything is now in deltas. It's more consistent. It's just more robust. Again, apologies I had to make that change, but it really had to be done. I hope it doesn't cause too much problems. For most people, it's not going to make any difference whatsoever, because not many people are making their own custom setups. Alright, so let's take a look at what has changed on the MXM animator. A few new things you should be aware of. Alright, so nothing in general animation data, but in options we have a few changes. First off, we have this new option for blend out early. This is just an option that I added that basically it blends out animations before they end so that they never come to an end. This helped stop a lot of jitter in my particular animations. Keep in mind I'm using runtime splicing and these clips are relatively long. However, I did find that with very short clips, it sometimes caused more jitter. So this is going to be dependent on your project. Try turning it on. If it creates more jitter, then turn it off. If it doesn't, keep it on. It makes mine much smoother. If you're using mocap, then definitely keep it on, or runtime splicing a lot. However, if you have really short, quick animation transitions like 0.2 seconds or something, it's probably going to make it worse. So there's that. Another important change is favor tagging has been fixed. It was not working properly. The favor tags were being sampled from the wrong place. So it's working now, and it's working quite well. I'm using it in this demo to differentiate between walking, running, and sprinting. And basically, it's a very common problem, and you've probably seen it where you'll be, walking, and then you'll like turn around, and it'll choose a run instead of a walk. And same with the running, you'll do a plant, and it'll start walking for some reason, and that was really quite annoying. So now that doesn't really happen anymore using these favor tags. And I would even argue that if you use favor tags well, you can probably replace require tags with favor tags, depending on how well you set up the weightings and also your animation sets. But yeah, that's up to experimentation really, and up to you how you do that. So just so you're aware, I've added a new script to the MXM demo, and it's actually attached to the robot Kyle, and that's this locomotion speed ramp. This actually controls those favor tags based on speed. It's really simple. Have a look at the code. In short, basically checking the input of the joystick, and if it's above a certain amount, which is whatever triggers the run trajectory, it will instantly upgrade the favor tag to the higher speed. However, if it's below that certain amount, it will rather downgrade. It'll downgrade the speed, but it'll have a bit of a delay. That's basically what that does. Have a look at it. It works really quite well. These errors are actually from Fmod, not MXM, so don't worry about that. Okay, so the other thing with favor tags, and this really makes them quite powerful and diverse, is there's 3 different methods now to use them. Now, the way that it's always been set up and the way that require tags work is exclusive. We now have inclusive and stacking. So say you have set the favor tags in MXM to run, combat, strafe, for example. Exclusive means if a pose does not, or if an animation doesn't have all 3 of those tags, it won't be given the favor. Inclusive is the opposite, or something like that, where if you have at least 1 tag of the favor tags, then it will get the favor. If you're a programmer, you could think of exclusive as an and inclusive as an or operator on your favor tags. The last one is probably the most powerful, and that is stacking. And this basically means that the more tags you have of the set favor tags in MXM, the more exponentially more favor a pose is going to get. So say you have, again, run, combat, and strafe favor tags set. A pose that has all of those favor tags set is going to have a lot more favor applied to it than a pose that only has 1, or even more so if it has none. So that is a really powerful application of favor tags. I haven't really gotten into using it a lot, but I imagine that with that, you can probably do away with require tags, and that's going to help with coverage, but it requires some clever implementation. So I'll leave that with you guys to play with. All right, that's it for options. Next up is warping. I haven't really changed how this works. However, I have removed the blend space option. We now have off, on, and external. External is used specifically for complex situations like the kinematic character controller integration, where the warping functions need to be called in a specific update order to suit that character controller. If you want to know how that works, you can look at my kinematic character controller wrapper. However, most people aren't going to find it used for external, and it's a very advanced sort of topic. So it's just on or off now. The reason I removed the blend space option is because using blend spaces for warping just isn't great. It worked, and it was something new that I added in the beta before I added scatter spaces, but they're kind of obsolete with scatter spaces, and I don't want to encourage their use because they're just not good. So I've removed them. The only other thing I've added is this angle range. If you're not using kinematic character control, you can probably still set this to 0. So instead of having a upper limit of, your angle error needs to be below this, it now needs to be between these two numbers in order to kick in. If you're using KCC, you need to set this between 3 and 5 degrees as a minimum, just to stop jitter, because the way kinematic controller works, it updates only in fixed update, and it doesn't resolve immediately, so it's really difficult to apply the procedural motion after the move when you haven't moved yet. It's a weird, almost like a time travel problem. But just know that is there. I'll probably put out more information on that. So next we have, well, that's about it actually for changes, but I just thought I'd point this out in the callbacks. To trigger these footstep animations, I've actually got a script called Footstep Player with my footstep system. This is not included in MXM. This is just my own custom code that I do for my game. But basically, MXM will handle footsteps to the point of triggering them. You tag them up in the timeline, and there's automatic ways to do that, and I'll show you that later. But if you tag them up, these callbacks will be called. So whatever you place here, you can see I'm calling a callback for play footstep left and play footstep right from this footstep player clip. And this is what we get. Lovely. So that is it for the MXM animator. Let's now take a look at the MXM preprocessor and the changes there. Now there's some big changes here. You can still use the preprocessor the same way as you used to. However, I highly recommend upgrading your workflow to the new modular system. So we've had for a while different modules. So we've had a motion matching config module, which basically overrides our trajectory configuration and pose configuration with a separate asset. So you can see it here. That's the asset. It just has the configuration. It just helps you have consistency throughout your project, and you can drag and drop it instead of having to redo it every single time. So that's there, and we always had our tag and event modules as well. Now, to complete this modular system for the preprocessor, there are now modules for animation data, and they go under this new tab, animation modules. You'll actually see that I don't have any animations specified in composites, idle sets, or blend spaces for the preprocessor anymore, at least not in this one. You can still put animations in here and they'll be preprocessed, but it's probably better to use a modular approach. This way you can take things out, put them back in, separate out things like here I've separated out locomotion and combat. I might even separate out attacks, dodges, and it just makes it a lot more modular and a lot more easy to handle. So if I have a look at a module, it's an asset, and it resembles the preprocessor in a lot of ways. Pretty much just the animation section, and it can also reference the config and tag and event modules. And the purpose for this is that animations, if I double click on this, let me just stop play mode. So if I double click on this and we get our editor, and we're able to set tags on our animations, but the tags don't really, they need to be consistent for every module that's going to be used in a preprocessor. So the best way to be consistent is to use, again, the tag, event, and config modules. Use the same ones for your modules as you do for your preprocessor, so that it all lines up. That way, when you're not going to get any mismatches, I didn't want to add a section for tags in the module, because then if you create them incorrectly or differently, then it's going to be mismatching when you come to pre-processing. So you need to use the modules with that. So yeah, you can see all my composites are here, idle sets and blend spaces, and they're all set up exactly the same way. When I go to my pre-process data, I can just drag and drop it in, and it'll have all of that data when it's pre-processed. I can also delete it. Now you can either create a module by right-clicking, going create, and we'll follow this long MXM core modules animation. This is also where you can create the motion match config, the event naming and tag naming modules as well. Again, I highly recommend you use these. It'll make your workflow easier down the line, especially if you want to create a different preprocessor that has the same things, but you want to try out different sets of animations, see how they perform. Okay, so that is that. The other way to create them, and this is going to be good if you've already got preprocessors set up, is you can export your current preprocessor to a module. That is going to export the animations, and it's also going to automatically slot in any override modules for config and tags and events that you already have slotted in. So it's not really worth exporting this here because I've got no animations, but if you get your preprocessor, first thing you do, export out a module. I actually exported out the module and then duplicated it and then deleted some of the categories and stuff so that this one only had locomotion and then this one only had the combat stuff. This way, you get a lot smaller inspector. You can just look at what you want to look at instead of having to scroll forever. So that is a nice new quality of life feature. So yeah, just make sure that your modules line up between your animation module and your preprocessor, because what matters at the end of the day is what tag names and events are in the preprocessor, not in the module, okay? So that is pretty much it for the preprocessor changes. Besides some bug fixes, there's been a lot of bug fixes to footstep preprocessing. And we'll just have a look at that. Let's find something more interesting. I'm going to go to my other scene here, my other project, the actual MXM project, and let's have a look at some footsteps, animation data. I've got modules. Let me think walk is a good one. And here we go. Let me just move this out of the way. And we'll preview this. Yep, save it. Okay, so here is a pretty long take, lots of footsteps. And what we want to do is we want to add footstep tags to this. We don't want to do it manually though, because that is going to be a pain. So if we go to utility, you can actually see I've already done it here. So basically, if you have a look at these two top tracks, you can see all these footstep tags. Now these were all automatically generated by the generator. I think I went through and checked and it only missed one footstep, so it's pretty accurate. Basically, the settings are down here. I'll make this bigger actually. I like to make it bigger for the utility section. So basically you click this auto detect footsteps. There's a few thresholds that you need to be aware of. So ground threshold. So it's pretty simple how it works. A footstep will only be detected if the foot is under a certain velocity or a certain speed, and also if it's under a certain height, so the ground threshold. You can actually set this to something like 0.25. So if the foot is under 0.25 meters high from the ground, from the character's lowest point, and it's not moving, then it's a footstep. These other ones you can probably set to 0. It's basically a way to make sure that, so minimum step spacing, it's like, well, you can't really have a footstep immediately after another footstep finishes. It doesn't really make sense. And so you can have a minimum amount of spacing between steps. However, with the new algorithm for the auto footstep detector, you could probably set this to 0. You can also set a minimum footstep duration. So say you're doing a walking animation and you want to just make sure that those footsteps, they're not super fast because you're walking, you could set a minimum footstep duration. However, I think if you set them to 0 and the ground to about 0.25, auto detect footsteps, this is actually going to override it, and then we get this here. You can actually see here, because I've had this minimum footstep duration, you can see I've got a few funny things going on here. See how the footstep starts and then it stops and then it starts again? That's not correct. So we can change that by going, so minimum footstep spacing, let's say 0.05. Try that again. There we go. It's linked it together. That's looking pretty good. And you could also say minimum footstep duration. This looks a bit funky. That doesn't look right to me. Could even say the 0.1, minimum footstep duration 0.05. Auto detect. There we go. Let's link that together nicely. Generally, with these footsteps, you'll find that you'll probably play around with these settings a little bit, and then once it starts to look right, that's it, and you can do that for the rest of your animations of the same speed, but you know, we just tagged up footsteps for about 35 seconds of animation data, and trust me, that will take you half an hour to do manually. So that is that. And yeah, those footsteps will automatically be triggered through the callbacks on the MXM animator at runtime. So there we have footsteps. There's a few more things to note. Obviously, the decouple controllers had a rework. There's a new KCC controller integration and decouple for that. That's all part of the KCC integration that you can download from the Discord channel if you're a verified user. I'll probably put out a tutorial on decouple controllers because it's not quite straightforward. But yeah, that'll go out. These two prefabs for the KCC are included with the integration. Obviously, you need kinematic character controller if you want that to work. Other improvements, the AI trajectory generator has been improved a lot. I've added a strafe option for that. You will need to set the desired facing direction manually for the AI because, well, it doesn't really know which way it needs to strafe unless you tell it to. So if you hit strafe and you set its desired strafing facing direction, then the AI trajectory generator will generate a strafing trajectory. Of course, you're going to need animations to match that as well. This has also been improved significantly. So apply root speed to nav agent. Previously, so let's have a look at this. So previously, it would check the root speed and say, well, you can't go, the nav agent can't go any faster than the root speed. And you can see that it's changing here really quickly all the time. Let's go to the scene and have a look at it. Now, instead of just doing that, it's now projecting the speed of the root motion onto the direction that the nav agent is going. That means you can't go fast in the opposite direction. It does improve it a lot, especially for turns and stuff. There's still a fair bit of foot sliding, and there's still some issues with the way that it can still turn in the wrong direction. So the nav agent will turn one way and the animation will turn the other way, but it's significantly improved, and I'm going to improve it a bit more, trying to see, you can see that he turned the wrong way at first. So I'm going to try and fix that for a later update, but it's getting a lot better, especially since this is only supposed to be an example. Okay, so that is pretty much all I can think of for this update. There's been quite a lot of fixes as well, which I'm not going to go over, but just the system's becoming way more robust. I'm going to be updating the user manual. This build is actually already available on the Discord channel, so you can go and download it there if you're a verified user. If you're not verified, send me a private message on the Discord with your invoice and I'll give you verified status. I am going to be submitting this to Unity very soon, but I need to update the user manual first, so keep in mind that that is coming, an update to the user manual. So thank you all for watching. This has been quite a big dev update. So I will see you next time, and I hope this all helps you out.